Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast with your host, Brandon Seigel. I'm a published author, speaker, entrepreneur, and private practice strategist dedicated to transforming the way that healthcare functions. This podcast is all about empowering you to create the change you want to see. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Today, I am joined by someone very special. Amy Lafko is joining me, and in my opinion, Amy is the best when it comes to putting people first. There is no one that I value her input, her expertise, or anyone else I'm excited to see involved in consulting to an organization. So today, what I really want us to focus on is this idea of the people first revolution and why patient-centered care is killing your team. And I think that's an interesting statement. And I wanted to frame this. This is obviously based on Amy's expertise, her book and whatnot. And so welcome to our episode, Amy. Why don't we start with just kind of telling us briefly, since this is your first appearance on our podcast, a little bit about you and how you came to this people first revolution.
Sure. Thanks for having me so much, Brandon. I really appreciate it. I'm honored and thrilled to be here. And I love to talk about the people first concept because, quite frankly, you introduced me as someone who, is an expert in this. And sadly, the reason I'm an expert is because I learned the hard way by failing, by putting my patients before my team. And then once I went through that experience of losing a team, I started to really investigate this idea of, patient first. As a PT, that's what I was raised on. And so it was patient first, patient first. And what I realized is that mindset shift that I needed to make as a leader to recognize that in order for my team to be successful and for the team to be patient first when they're working one-on-one with those patients, they need to be supported by me as the leader. So then I started to do research. I interviewed a lot of amazing practitioners and really took it from there.
Awesome. I love it. So, I guess, was there a defining moment when you recognized that putting patients first was destroying your practice? Like, talk to us just kind of like, what was that, like, whoopsie daisy or whatnot, so to speak?
I couldn't figure out why people were not excited to come to work. I couldn't figure out why people didn't want to move forward with some of the really cool initiatives that we were looking at implementing. I couldn't figure out why, absenteeism went up and people were looking to transition into other places. And just the fact that everyone was grumpy walking around the office. And where was that coming from? It wasn't until after the fact that I was able to look back and realize, oh, Amy, you failed your team, and you let them down because I was literally bulldozing over them to get to patients having the care that they needed and patients being directly supported.
Well, and so why don't we define, how do you prioritize people over patients? What does that look like? What would you say is an example of, like, here's an example of how Clinic A would normally handle this situation, and here's how I would have handled it differently from a patient first or a people first standpoint?
You bet. So I think one of the examples would be even how we look at hiring. If we go in with a patient first mindset, it's really focused on technical skills. Do they have the exact technical skills that I'm looking for? Whereas people first is the team needs to feel supported. The team needs to have the right person join us so that we keep the culture that we have. So to me, that fit is less about technical skill and more about how are they going to align with the team, with our values, with our mission, and with our, ways of functioning. So that's an example. I mean, I think another example is, when there's something that goes wrong, and it does. Patient first is the patient's right, which may be true. And to that patient, when I'm the leader working with that patient, I'm absolutely going to say, yes, we're going to make this right. We're going to do what we need to. But behind the scenes, people first is really working with that person where that mistake happened and saying, Walk me through it. Help me understand it. How are we going to do this together? Because it's about engaging and supporting in that staff member and really understanding what their needs are. Patient first is you know all of your patients by name, even the ones you're not treating yourself, but you don't necessarily know a lot about your staff because you're so focused on the patient. People first is really understanding who each of your team members are, what motivates them, how they prefer to be communicated with, what are their goals, what are their interests, what are their hot buttons. And that's really what it means to be people first. I mean, I have people ask me all the time, does that mean that everybody gets off on Fridays if they want? No, of course not. We still need to be open for patients. There is a business balance. It's just the way we approach the conversations. I've terminated people even in a people first way. And so you can have that mindset of we've still got to be business owners. We've still got to be practice owners. We still have to care for our patients, but we can do it in a way that really sets our team up for success.
100%. And, it's interesting. There are several things that you just unpacked that got me inspired. And one thing that you said that I thought was so interesting, it literally brought me back to being a little kid, was you said, we get trained that the patients are always right. And I remember as a child, my parents would always say, if there is one thing that you always follow in life, it is the customer is always right. And it's so interesting. So my parents grew up customer service oriented. They raised my brothers and I. They built this business, California Closets. And all I heard was, no matter what, customer is always right. And as I've evolved as a manager, I recognized that they were wrong. The statement that the customer is always right is not about them actually being right. It's about them always feeling valued.
Yes.
The words are wrong. So it's not that right or wrong doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's that they feel valued, that their opinion matters, that they're being acknowledged for their viewpoint. And as I look at what that translates to people, we've always valued the customer over the worker.
Yeah.
And in today's environment, there is no customer without a team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always say, like, this idea of like happy wife is a happy life. Well, it's kind of in this way of like, if our team is happy, our patients will be fulfilled as a result. And
Absolutely.
so as I look at your people first revolution, I like to call it your revolution, but the revolution is really about what I'm going to call curating a group of people that align their values, their mission, their purpose, their intention, and that we are serving the group of people, not the individual people, the group of people. And I think that's where people take this people first mindset out of context, because you mentioned this idea of firing. We have to eliminate anyone that is the liability of our group. And sometimes we don't know till we know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, Amy, I had this come to me recently. I hired an employee, and in 30 days, it became apparent that she wasn't moldable to our needs for the group. Like, it was a group decision. And
Yeah.
it wasn't that she's a bad person, and it wasn't that
Mhm.
she misled us, and it wasn't that she doesn't have skill sets. It was that she did not fit the needs of the group. And it's interesting that after 30 days, and I bring this up to you because I'm curious how you would handle it. 30 days, leadership, management, peer review was like, not a fit. It's not working. So one of the things I always ask is I ask for 4 to 6 weeks notice if anyone's ever going to leave. And so I'm willing to give the same 4 to 6 weeks
Mhm.
if it's not. And my viewpoint, she knew over the course of 30 days, every week it was, you're not there, you're not there, you're not there. We're working with you, we're training you, to a point where 3 weeks in, the manager said, look, is this a byproduct of my training? I said, asked the person, like, I've done all I can. And the employee said, no, it's not you, it's me. Like, she owned it straight up. And she kept saying, give me another chance, give me another chance, give me another chance, give me another chance. But at 30 days, you have to set a certain bar where they're either at a certain point or you're going to be playing this game forever. And it's interesting because she could not have it. So at 30 days, the manager met and said, we're letting you know you did not pass your 30-day period. We are giving you notice that you have 6 weeks of employment to seek out alternative employment, and we will work with you. And interesting enough, she flipped it and kept saying, oh, so you're giving me 6 weeks to prove myself. The statement was, no, the 6 weeks is so that you have time to find a job. And she couldn't have it. And so she ended up emailing me directly and saying, hey, I thank you so much for giving me 6 weeks to prove myself. And I wrote and I said, I'm sorry if there was a miscommunication. I said, we've actually decided that based on your performance, you're 30% into where you should be at 30 days. And I'd rather you have the 6 weeks to explore alternative employment. This was more than skill set. And so everyone's like, well, couldn't she have in 6 weeks get to where you want? I'm like, there's a certain mesh. And so people first is how do people mesh within that group? And I'm just curious your feedback in this, because I was pretty black and white. I was like, it's either a fit or it's not. There's a certain point where you have to cut the umbilical cord and say, it's not the skill set. The skill set is one thing. Could I get her to performing at a suitable level? Maybe, but it was no longer, my team didn't feel like they could train, mentor, and adapt. And so I'm just curious from a people first mindset, your thoughts on this circumstance. And you can make me wrong if you think I should have given more chance, but I'm just curious.
I think that there are people we know right off where maybe it doesn't feel like a right fit. And then that's when I always say, okay, people first is looking back and saying, what could I as the leader have done differently? And I also always ask a couple questions when I hear people say they're not the right fit. I was just in conversation with someone yesterday and she said she's not a team player. And I said, what does that mean to you? We want to get to behavior so that we can then look at the impact and then work with someone on a correction plan. I said, because saying to someone, listen, you're not a team player, wasn't going to help that person. I said, what are examples of her not being a team player? And she said, a patient came and wanted to give her payment for like a special program and she didn't take it. She said, go to this person and have them do it because it's not my job. I said, okay, so is the behavior that she said not my job? And she said, yes. And I said, what's the impact of that? She's like, the patient had to go somewhere else and she had to do something else. But what we actually discovered was, I said, okay, did you follow up on the behavior now? You didn't accept this payment. Is there a reason that they didn't? Or is it just that they're quote unquote not a team player? So I am a firm believer in, yes, you need to let people go. I mean, and to my own detriment, I'm slower to do that than I should be. But when we're going to do it, I want it to be as clear as possible. You gave a really great metric there. You said, listen, you're only 30% of the way towards your 30-day expectations. So the more clear we are on those expectations, here are the 5 things we're going to be measuring you on. And if one is nebulous, like teamwork, like respect, like, those soft things, we still want to help people understand the behavioral aspect of it as much as possible. There's always an intangible. I mean, there is, but the more we can set it clearly, the better.
So for this, we set a 5-day marker. What most people with experience can complete in 5 days, we give 30 days to accomplish. And so at 2 weeks, we gave the first check-in. We're not there. At 3 weeks, we didn't give the check-in. And I think when I think about behavior, just for people to think with this is really the core of it was responsibility, detail-orientedness, follow through, and asking for permission versus asking for forgiveness.
Yeah.
So we kept bringing this idea of you keep doing things even though it's against company policy and you're asking for forgiveness. And we keep bringing it to your perspective. Something as simple as fill out the timesheet. You filled it out and then you dropped doing it right. Well, and so the shortcuts and the this, that, well, sorry, I was trying to do this and da, da, da. And at the end of the day, I think when we look at behavior, we also have to look at what responsibility level someone is
Mhm.
taking, because words and actions can often contradict each other.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point, even just with the time card. What's the definition of success? It's 100% of the time the time card is filled out accurately and turned in by the due date. So, one of the great things that people can use as a performance measure is listen, you're at 60% accuracy or you're at 30% accuracy of turning in that time card. And then my question is always, what are you going to do differently next time?
Mhm.
What are you going to do differently next time to make sure that you can get there? And that's where you're going to start to see some of that critical thinking.
Yep.
So I'm never going to second guess for someone whether or not they needed to let that person go. I'm just going to invite them to think about, did you do it in a way that A, supported the humanness and honored the humanness of that person?
Mhm.
B, were clear and transparent about what the issues were all along the way. C, gave them the opportunity to create their own development plan with your support. And then touching base with them regularly to see how they were doing towards it. That's
Yeah.
what people first is. It's not whether or not you hire someone or whether or not you fire someone.
Yeah.
It's the ways in which we do those things.
Well, and that's why even I bring up this point of how often do you hear of people wanting notice, but then they don't give notice when they terminate. And so my rule of thumb is whatever I ask, I shall give. So I ask for 4 to 6 weeks. I'm going to give you 6 weeks. Like I'm going to give you what I will be excited by. And a lot of people are like, well, what if their performance goes down? Well, if their performance goes down, then there's termination with cause, obviously. Um, but at the end of the day, I do think taking into account how we value people. So even when someone is not a fit for your company and they're going to be angry, I don't know how this employee will leave the company, how they will feel, but I know that I've treated them in the most positive way in terms of what I would want to be treated. And I have a high bar. And so I think what happens is when we attract a people first culture, I also think our team raises the bar for others. And so this idea of a rising tide floats all boats, that is how we separate in a people first environment. What I call is the asset of the people versus the liability.
And that's going to help you attract others because the people on your team are going to be saying, hey, you want to come work here if this is the environment you want. And, oh, that makes me think of so and so who I used to work with. I should call them and see if they're open to coming over and having a conversation. So, absolutely. And I bet there's some people out there still freaking out in the background going, 6 weeks, you're going to pay them for 6 weeks and they're going to do a terrible job, or what are they going to sabotage before they go? I've often worked with folks where we say, all right, here's your notice period. And if you can choose to work, and as long as your work product is good, we'll keep you. Otherwise, we're just going to pay you out. Because,
Well, and
yeah.
and that's essentially in my head. I got to a point very transparently where I said to the manager, I said, if the performance becomes more of a liability than an
Mhm.
asset, then let me just severance it out.
Exactly.
And but I come back to this component of people are like, well, that's a lot, Brandon. You're paying her out more in notice than the actual amount of time she worked for you. My viewpoint is, well, that is the owie that I get for my hiring decision. Plain and simple. I take it personal. I see it as
Mhm.
this is a direct reflection of my hire. I don't care if my manager's endorsed or not. I signed off on it.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, I deserve to bear the burden, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Yeah.
And it is the right thing to do. And so as you're looking at this people first mindset, one of the things that I find sometimes is if I go, hey, we need to prioritize our people, they think that that means we're not prioritizing our patients.
Mm.
And this might be different, but my viewpoint is when I prioritize people, I'm prioritizing everyone. So I'm prioritizing who are the right patients for my staff. I'm not putting someone on my staff that's going to burn them out. And I give this analogy, Amy, or this example. Back in the day, had a pretty busy pediatric therapy clinic. There was a specific census and payer that burned my people out.
Mm,
And I cut the contract, and
yeah.
people thought that I didn't care about my patients. And I said, I won't be able to serve patients if I have this demographic. We're not fit for this public. So by prioritizing people, we're also prioritizing our patients, because we are picking patients that are going to thrive with the people that we have. And
Mhm.
retention, that's important. Continuity of care, that's important. And at the end of the day, we're in a supply and demand market.
Yeah.
The demand is greater than the supply
Mhm.
in healthcare. So, how are you helping explain to staff this mindset that we want to prioritize people, but that doesn't deter from how we prioritize our patients?
And it's really about the lens you're looking from. So with my staff and teams that I'm working with, if they are directly working with the patient, then for them in that moment, it is patient first. I want them to focus on the patient that is in front of them. When I think about people first from a leadership standpoint, if that leader or practice owner is also treating patients in that moment, they're going to prioritize that patient. They're going to focus on that patient that they're with. But when they are stepping back from that, it's actually your people are the people that you support and directly serve. So this gets really important as you have larger organizations where you have potentially a CEO who then has, their C-suite or their director level. Then the director level has the managers, and then the managers have the therapists, and then the therapists have the patients. There's actually a page in my book where we show that turned on its side hierarchy, and your people are the people that you directly support. Because I think one of the things that can happen is we think, oh, if I'm the CEO, I want an open door policy, so I'm going to let those frontline staff come talk to me too. But now we have to be careful. Am I actually cutting my directors and my managers out at the knees? And how am I supporting them if I'm saying, no, what you think as my director doesn't matter. It's all about the front line. So we actually want to think in this cascading approach of how am I taking care of all people in the practice? But then how am I supporting the people that I work with directly so that they can then support their people? It's this idea that if I am going to be supporting people, I want them to have a strong enough infrastructure. I want them to feel so confident and secure that I've got them, that they can go out and do their best work with whoever they support. I think about like those amazing cheerleader pyramids. The person that's at the bottom of the pyramid isn't thinking about the person that's at the top of the pyramid. They're thinking about the person they hold up. And you as the owner or the practice lead is that person holding up that first rung. And then that first rung supports the next, and that next supports the person at the top.
Beautiful. I totally agree. And so, as we're looking at this people first revolution, recognize we have nothing without people.
Yeah.
So, we need to craft and create the systems, solutions, accountability, mission, vision, all these things, because the more that the team is self sustaining, the stronger the team will be. And so it's when we create the hierarchy, in my opinion, that we run into issues, because everyone uses that next step of like, oh, well, I can't do anything. It's how do we empower people
Yeah.
to really take that next step? So I thank you, Amy, for joining this episode. Why don't you share with everyone how they can find you, get in touch with you, and learn from you more?
You bet. So obviously people can just email me directly. And I know we're going to have it in the show notes, but my email is amy@cairncs.com. I'm on LinkedIn, pretty easy to find there, Amy Lafko. And you can always reach out through my website, which is cairncs.com for Cairn Consulting Solutions.
Yep. And if you have trouble, you can always see it in the show notes, or you can
Exactly.
reach out to me directly and I will connect you with Amy, because Amy is the best at what she does. And I think each and every one of you should learn from her. So thank you for tuning into this episode of the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. Don't forget, like us, subscribe, follow us on all the different channels, and together we can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for tuning in to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. Exciting news. We're now available everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. So watch, listen, and reach out. If you love this episode, please drop a 5-star review. It truly means the world to me. Are you looking for more ways to elevate your practice? If so, now is your chance. Reach out, go to my website, or email me at brandon@wellnessworksmp.com. And remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.